Ned, what's going on, dude? How are you?
Oh, phenomenal, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so I haven't told you really what I wanted to get into yet, so let's let's dive through it. But uh you're back on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is full of super useful information and then also a ton of bullshit as well. And I was very happy to see you were back uh providing some of the first thing that I mentioned. So I wanted to dive into a couple different aspects of
Mhm.
sales. So if y- I want to dive into ideal customer profile. I want to dive into building a playbook. I want to dive into effective enablement, and then how you guys are using some numbers to drive some of these decisions on where you go, how you roll these things out, how you do training, how you manage
Yeah.
people. Um, so I definitely want to cover some of that. If you can you give a quick rundown on what you do and kind of your history and how you got
Yeah.
here?
Well, number one, those are all really awesome topics. So, you know, let's have some fun today. Yeah, I'm currently the Chief Revenue Officer at Attyx Home Services. Um, about a year and a couple of months ago, a company that I helped start called Beam Solar was acquired by a company called Sunco. Um, I have never, ever, ever been in like construction. I'm literally like not even, I don't think I've ever lifted a hammer or a drill in my entire life. So to like start a construction company, build it, and then be acquired has been a really wild ride. And it's been super cool to learn about a completely different like industry from my background. My background is in software sales and tech. Before Beam, I was at ClozeLoop with Corey and Hillman. And before that, I was multi-time first sales leader hire at early stage startups. And so kind of cut my teeth in the enterprise software stage and learning how to build from zero to, I guess now I can officially say, to 200 plus million. But in the tech days, it was like 50 plus. So
That's cool. That's very cool. Yeah. All right. So let's start with the ideal customer profile. So I kind of went back through some of your posts and I'm dude, is the timing is so perfect with this stuff. But so let's dive into that. When you go and look at everybody talks about ideal customer profile and you need to know this and then what do they eat
yeah,
and all that shit. It's like, all right, what is actually important about it? And why do you feel like knowing who your customer is, knowing their pains, what their day-to-day is like, all that kind of stuff? Why is that even more important than knowing the product, all of that? So I kind of want to dig into some of
yeah.
these.
So I truly think that prospect knowledge outweighs product knowledge 10 out of 10 times. Um, Even if
Okay.
it's a super technical product, because you're not getting in the door if I just tell you a bunch of features and benefits and it's like, cool, what's your differentiator, things of that. In my role right now, it's pretty interesting because our ideal customer profile is a homeowner, right? And it's not as
Yeah.
simple as, and I say simple kind of tongue in cheek, but it's not as simple as knowing that, hey, we go after VPs of sales or VPs of HR at a 50-person company. They're doing X amount of revenue, things of that nature. But I think the issue is that a lot of people stop at that, what I just said, right? Hey, we go after homeowners that, for us, it's, they don't have the upfront cash to get a home improvement project. They don't have the monthly payment available to do high interest rate loans, things like that. But we even go a step deeper. But I'll talk kind of the tech side of things here, since that's mainly the audience. But
No, actually, dude, if you don't mind, let's dig into
cool.
this because yeah, let's dig into it if
Yeah,
you're
no,
cool with
totally.
that.
So I think it's very easy for companies to sit there and say, hey, this is who we go after, right? Here are the things that they are, right? They are a homeowner. They are this age range. They typically have this, income level, things of that nature. These are the people we help with. They don't have upfront cash to do this project. The thing that really differentiates understanding an ICP and creating an ideal customer profile is understanding the pain that that person has at that level, right? And so the reason with like prospect knowledge over product knowledge is, in my opinion, it really is understanding that customer or that prospect at a very deep level. And I've kind of made the joke is like, you need to know that what a prospect does the minute their feet hit the floor when they wake up in the morning. What do they eat for breakfast? What, when do they check their email? Those kind of things. Just for the mere fact that, like, back when I was with Canny, for instance, we were selling to heads of product. I started shadowing heads of product at some of our top companies and understood that, if we called into product between the hours of like 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. or 4 p.m., like, dude, they're not checking their email. They're not answering their phone. They're doing product stuff at that company. They're in meetings. They're actually doing, and so understanding their day to day is such a crucial piece to this. And so I think the biggest thing that I would
Okay.
just say, like, why is understanding your ideal client profile, ideal customer profile so important is because you start to understand the person. And then once you understand the person, you can understand their problem. And then once you understand their problem, you can understand how our solution ties to that problem. But before any of that is you actually have to understand the person. And with that being said, with a lot of the tech individuals, it's like, hey, what the CEO cares about or the CRO doesn't necessarily align with the exact problem that you could solve for the director level or for the individual contributor that would be utilizing the product. So it really helps craft your
Okay.
message at a very deep level.
And so when you have that scenario, all right, let's come back to that multiple scenario where you've got multiple people and you need to figure it out. But coming back to this, like the product manager piece, right? Like, if you have somebody that has that mindset between 8 and 3, 8 and 4, you've got to know as a salesperson, these people aren't checking their email. They're not going to engage with you at that time because that type of role is not a super customer interactive type role. It's not a sales type role where there's heavy communications outside of the company. It's going to be a lot of thought, deep work, conversations internally, and there's not really any external pressure for them to be available all the time.
There's actually probably pressure
with
for them to not be available, right?
so with that, yeah, true. With that thought in mind, it's like those communication channels are not going to be available to me, most likely to have impact during that time. So at least, all right, so that gets you like on a messaging or an outreach perspective or level of the strategy. So now that you have that, what's step 2 of that to figure out, okay, well, if they're not going to answer the phone at that time, it's like, then what?
Yeah. And I think like a couple of years ago, I coined the term micro marketer. And what I mean by that is, I think a lot of the stuff that we hear on LinkedIn and the advice that we hear on LinkedIn, there's a lot of sellers selling to different sellers or marketers selling to marketers who are on LinkedIn, posting, doing all of these things. I mean, some of the most successful people I know, like I've got a really good buddy of mine who sells toilet paper for a living to massive companies. It's toiletries, but we make fun of him. But like literally, like he's got massive accounts of like Disney, the Atlanta airport, the Orlando airport. I can tell you right now, the head of janitorial at the Atlanta airport, I bet if we look that person up, they're not on LinkedIn, right? And so there's a couple of things a couple of levels here that are extremely important. Number one is you have to go to where your prospect is. Once you know where your prospect is, that's when you can start to engage with them, right? And, so for Canny, a lot of it was webinars. A lot of it was introducing these types of hacks, quote unquote, that these individuals could do that they would send their product managers to. And a lot of times, if the decision maker is this like high level person, like a VP of product, a CPO, you can go and actually reach out to like a product manager or an individual contributor and start to work your way up and start to understand what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But I think really it is a matter of like, well, what does that outreach actually look like and how can you actually get to these people? It's going to where they are. And you can only understand that if you understand the persona. But once you understand the persona, you have to understand their direct pain, right? What in their day to day are they dealing with that potentially you could solve? right? And so like maybe you've got a dashboard on your, on your product, which I would not recommend you selling people on a dashboard that's table stakes. But for the sake of this, it's like you've got a dashboard, and the pain is this product leader has to actually go in manually to the CRM, pull this data. They have to go like customer feedback, for instance. They have to pull the data. They have to put it into a spreadsheet. They have to build VLOOKUPs. They have to build all of these pivot tables and everything just so they can understand what is the feature that is the most requested, volume over volume, not loud, but as much as humanly possible. That right there is something that is impactful for them, right? So if I'm going after them, I am going to say, hey, most of the CPOs that I'm speaking with are having to do X, Y, and Z, right? If I understand the layers of the individuals that I'm going after, it allows me to actually get very pointed to that. So if I'm a director, right, they may be running into the same issues, or they may have a completely different issue that you may potentially solve for. But then from there is where you finally can get to those features and benefits that like where you can solve that problem, right? But until you understand the persona, until you understand their day to day and where they live and the channels that they operate in, right? Product people, yeah, some of them are on LinkedIn, but we found like a majority of them are actually on like Discord, and we're actually like in, doing webinars and actually being a part of those. So our strategy was we actually started a podcast. We had these product people in, we invited them onto webinars. When you get a big name person, and now let me just caveat this with, if you're a sales rep listening to this and I'm saying this, that doesn't mean that you stop doing your job, right? That doesn't mean that you stop like going out and making dials and sending emails and LinkedIn messages and things of that nature. But it does mean that the strategy at an organization, which is probably a completely different podcast, understanding like if you're looking for a job and the strategy is, hey, we're selling to owners of HVAC companies. Here's what we're doing is we're doing LinkedIn lives. You probably don't want to join that company because my company rolls up HVAC companies and very few of these 60-year-old guys are like on LinkedIn at all. So I think it just becomes like, once you know that persona, you know where they are, you can understand that pain at a deep level. Then from there, you're able to actually craft a message that is compelling enough for someone to actually spend time with you or at least respond to your message.
And so that's where the micro marketing piece comes in, is you've got to know who you're selling to, what their day-to-day is. By understanding the day-to-day, you can better understand, okay, what are the actual things that they're dealing with, both from like a workflow perspective and then, like even politics internal to their company. How do they relate to other people? What are the headaches that they're dealing with on all those fronts? And then if you know what those are and where they're at, you can actually present those messages, those pain points, those solutions in those channels and start that conversation. And I remember now that you're saying micro marketing, I remember you on those training calls, you said you created a newsletter, like a salesperson newsletter, and sent that out like weekly or
I would
whatever it was.
send
What
out,
was that?
I would send out a newsletter to all of my prospects, which I don't know if this is like compliant anymore, like, but I would just like cold email, and it was just like a newsletter that had nothing to do with Canny outside of like my email. And like I did this, actually I started this at NetPulse, so this is a long time ago, but it had nothing to do with us other than the, email that I had. And it was just like industry news. It was like cool things that are happening right now, books you should check, or like videos you should check out from this week that have to do with that, like a post from the week. And then I would do some sort of like miscellaneous thing that was typically on the funnier side, right? At least I thought it was funny.
Who's this fucking idiot sending me this?
Exactly, right? Like they're like, who is this guy? And the micro marketing piece is really the aspect of, hey, I'm here to provide value. And I really don't necessarily love that phrase of provide value, because value is subjective, but
it's important. It's important. Like I think it's important. That's why I do the podcast, to your point. And everybody talks about that, deliver value before you even make an ask. And you're like, how the hell do I do that? But that's one of the things that we do with the podcast, I found that over time that by doing these podcasts and engaging with the people in your industry, it's a great way to actually make a connection with somebody. It's not a sales
Yeah.
conversation. And you don't want to then kind of pervert it and make it a sales conversation because people will pick up
Yeah.
quick, both the audience and the person you're interviewing. But also, it's actually a way to deliver value as I see it, because we're like, you do this, you do a video thing, we put out clips. We did this actually leading up to this trade show, and it was like, hey, I tell me about your business, tell me what you guys are going to be rolling out at this show. And it truly delivers value because they're trying to sell
Yeah.
stuff, they're trying to grow their business, they're trying to get out the word about it. And everybody has a sales problem, everybody has a marketing problem, everybody wants to get the word out, and it's actually a way that you can deliver it. But then it's the follow-ups from there of like, hey, let's
Yeah.
talk. You have that connection made. What was the result of actually having that that newsletter go out? Like, what did you see from
I mean,
that?
it was left and right, people responding back. I remember I actually stopped the newsletter. NetPulse was going through an acquisition, and I just stopped it because there was a lot of stuff going on. And I had people that had never actually replied to the newsletter hit me up and say, "Hey, where's the newsletter?" And it's like,
That's
"Oh
awesome.
crap!" Like, I didn't realize anyone even read this thing, and I spend 2, 3, 4 hours a week on it, and I started to make it look nice. But I mean, what it was people that I wanted to get in touch with were reaching out to me because I was top of mind, right? And it's the same thing what you're talking
Hmm.
about with the podcast is like, one thing I'll say about a podcast too is like you can easily pervert that podcast into like, hey, come on here, and
100%.
then I'm going to pitch you for the next 27 years until you buy, die, or unsubscribe. But I think even with a podcast is like I can start to ask questions about the person's business that are helping them get their word out to their customer base, but it's also helping me understand their
Yes.
data. It's also helping me if I'm not going to like if I'm talking to someone on my podcast and I've got 3 or 4 or 5 other people in my like little black book, right, or on Apollo that I want to reach out to, I can just shoot this video clip over to this person and say, "Hey Chris, I met with Joe Blow and we had him on the podcast. It was really interesting. Hey, I saw you guys are growing as fast as him. Here are some of the things that he was saying. Help them get through this pain point." The end. That's the email, right?
Yep.
And that person's going to respond. And, if they're a half decent human being, they're going to be like, "Hey, thanks, bro." You're not going to get, "Hey, thanks, we should meet." It's going to be, "Thank you." But that initial opening allows you now, as the rep, to say, "Hey, I'm going to start sending this person something weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, whatever it may be, quarterly if you have super long sales cycles or whatever it may be." But what it does is when you like create content, you become a micro marketer and you become this individual that's out there. And I think this is why a lot of like the content creators on LinkedIn do so well is because they are creating this content that they are putting out into the ether to these people that can hire them and will hire them eventually, hopefully. And they can even be cold emailing that to people, LinkedIn messaging it to people. I mean, I get it all the time where I'll just have people like send me clips to podcasts and they, like you said, they pervert it and saying, "Hey, you could be having problems with this," or they didn't do research. Like a guy like told me he loved the mission of Attyx today and then asked if it was only me at the company. Doesn't look like he did much research. But that being said, it's like you the biggest piece that I can say about this is, man, when you create content and you share and it's valuable content. Like I spent,
Hmm.
when I was with ClozeLoop, like we would build a ton of material, some of our best stuff, and we would just go out to the world with it. And like, "Hey, here are all our frameworks. Here's a video of Hillman talking about how to actually implement this. Here's Corey working on a spreadsheet, right? And this is exactly how you do these things." And we would just have people come back left and right and be like, "Hey, we were just thinking about this thing." And there wasn't an ask in that email, right? It was just, "Hey, here's
No.
this thing. Hey, you're this size company. Typically, chief revenue officers at this size company are dealing with X, Y, and Z. Hey, here's a spreadsheet. You should try this." The end, right? And I think that's where a
Yep.
lot of salespeople get it wrong. But the reason they get it wrong is because they don't understand their persona. They don't understand the person they're going after. And so they're either saying the wrong
Yeah.
thing to the wrong person or they're saying the right thing to the wrong person. And I think a lot of it, having been where I've been for the, close to almost 3 years now, is, between Beam and Attyx, is like my strategy that I put in place as the chief revenue officer affects my down funnel team, right? Like if I say, hey, we're going to start marketing to, like for us, if I marketed to high end individuals with our ads, we wouldn't get people that would be interested in our product. That's just not who it is. So it doesn't matter how well someone knows our prospect, how well someone knows our customer. If I'm putting a strategy out there that's completely opposite or completely like it doesn't align with the actuality of who we serve and the pain that they have, then it's my fault as a leader. And so I think there's a lot of reps who aren't getting trained. They potentially have the wrong persona in front of them. Their playbook is 3 years old and it's never been touched since then. And they're reading things from when they were a Series A company. Now they're a Series C company. And now the customer has changed, the product has changed. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, if you're a micro, like instead of looking at yourself as a salesperson, look at yourself as a micro marketer. Like Dale Dupree does this probably is better than anyone in the world with his like wild, crazy antics that, he puts out.
Who?
Have you seen Dale Dupree, Sales Rebellion?
Sounds
You need to look
familiar.
him up. Like he does these,
Dale
he used to
Dupree.
sell copiers.
Okay.
Like he started the Sales Rebellion. Like he's dropped like life-size like cardboard cutouts of himself off at people's offices. Like he does this like crumpled letter campaign where you send someone a crumpled piece of paper and like when they open it up it says, hey, most of your sales stuff ends up in the garbage anyway, so I thought I'd do half the work for you, but if you're interested in having a conversation, hit me back. Right? Does like coffee stained letters. Hey, most of this stuff probably crossing your desk has a coffee stain on it, so I thought it's just like being more like just creative in the process as a salesperson, but it all does come back to you having to know who the hell you're talking to.
Yeah. And also another point too is even going through all the closed loop stuff and all the trainings, and you can have you can even have the perfect pitch to the right person at the right time. But if you really don't understand, if you don't understand what you're saying, you might get an initial hook, but it's like,
well, now what do you do in
oh,
discovery?
I got a big fish and I have a $10 like child's fishing rod. Like there's no way this thing's staying on the line.
100%. Like I mean, dude, it's one of those things where I think there's a misconception about the amount of sales and business acumen that sales development reps and even full cycle AEs need to be successful.
What do you mean?
Yeah, it really is. I think that some of the things, trying to be semi PC here, but it's like the biggest thing that I've seen in my time just across my career is sales development reps. It's seen as an entry level position, but they're the ones that are going after the people that are going to go spend thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars with you. They're having that initial conversation. And a lot of times they're taught to just say, hey, that's what the account executive is going to go over with you. Let's meet tomorrow or the next day. Right? When in reality, what you just said is a really, really good call out, because as the sales development rep, I could have the perfect pitch. I could have the perfect tonality. I could have the perfect pitch, pace, tone, all of the things that everyone talks about here. And like I'm doing, whether it be the mic drop method or I'm doing the, hey, neutralize the statement at the end, and like whatever it may be that I see all over the place on LinkedIn. And guess what? All of it works. But when the chief revenue officer of the company that you just cold called that happened to pick up his phone and gave you 30 seconds of the day asks you a question and uses an acronym that you don't understand, or uses some sort of jargon or vernacular or something, and they ask you a question of how you solve that problem for them on that cold call, and you can't answer that confidently, man, you've just lost that deal. And that's a good look, man. Like that's a good look. And you need to be able to have that business acumen. And this is where I'm just really, really bullish on the training and the coaching side of things, and actually having like reps go through true training and enablement, and like have managers that are tasked with truly coaching these individuals. Like, because as an SDR, it shouldn't be like, hey, make 100 dials, cross your fingers and hope you talk to 10 people, right? And of those 10 people, you may, book 2 meetings. It should be, hey, how do we make this individual an expert, not in our product? How do we make this person an expert in our prospect? how do we make them an expert in our industry? And the problem is that most people jump industries every 2 years, right? And I'm not necessarily saying job
Yeah.
hopping is a bad thing, right? I mean, I think there was data that came out that it was like, if you stay at a company over the course of 10 years, you'll get like, 10% increase in your salary. But if you like jump every 3 years, you'll get like a 47% increase in your salary. So it's like, cool, job hopping, do your thing, make your money. But I think it does become, hey, if you're sitting in that seat, it is your role, your responsibility, and it is my responsibility as your leader to make you an expert in our prospect, in their pain, in their problems that they go through on a day-to-day basis. And then from there, it's to continue coaching you and making you an expert in this industry.
So now that you're moved out of, well, for now B2B, but you're selling to homeowners, and you have a lot of people working for you, how do you do that now? I guess, and if we can, how did you do that when you had a smaller team and you were building that up? And then how has that evolved as the business has grown and you've scaled and you have this many more people beneath you?
Yeah, early on, man, I found every and any publication that had to do with HVAC, roofing, and solar, right? And like, I
Okay.
don't know if we were recording when I said this, but I've never lifted a hammer in my life. So I didn't know the difference between a compressor or a coil in an HVAC. Dude, I didn't even know HVACs were inside your house. Like, I thought it was just that outside unit. So I'm just sitting there like, oh yeah, your HVAC. And they're like, you want to see the inside one? I'm like, no shit. You have one of these boxes? Like, and then like the roof, like I didn't realize that, hey, the roof, there's plywood involved. Like, dude, I'm like, dude, I sold software, right? Like I sold sales training and
Hmm.
enablement, dude. Like it was like, cool. I hired someone to do that stuff. And so the biggest thing that I did early on was I became the expert in HVAC. Like today, I probably wouldn't be the one that you would want like drilling, and that's a screwdriver but so like drilling um, shows how much I know. But I probably wouldn't be the one.
I'm in the
There
same
you go.
boat.
I wouldn't be the one drilling your HVAC, but I would know what to do. Like I know every piece of the HVAC. I know every like different shingle type on a roof. I could tell you the difference between one solar panel, the efficiency of the other, right? And what I did is I literally built
Okay.
out in our LMS when we first started everything that I was learning. So this is kind of one thing that I'll caveat is not caveat, but you have to document everything that you're learning as a leader, right? And I think that's where the playbook comes into
Okay.
play is like, hey, it shouldn't be sitting on someone's shelf for 3 years because you should be documenting all of the new things that you're learning because you should be learning and then teaching your reps. But I learned everything and I built HVAC 101, roofing 101, solar 101, right? The guys had to go through that course. Then we did 201, 301, 401, and it just got deeper and deeper and deeper into that. Now, the reason that, and I think if you're listening, you're going, well, Ned, that's product knowledge, not prospect knowledge. Well, in our industry, like we truly like understand now who buys our stuff, right? But if you know the product in like the home services industry, you can understand the problem that an individual has, right? Because hey, here's what happens when a
Why is
coil
that?
goes out, right? I can sit there and say, here's what
Okay.
happens when a compressor goes out. Here's what Mary, the homeowner, is dealing with inside of her home. Here's what, if there's a leak in the roof, right? Here's what Mary is dealing with. Here are the issues with that. But if I go back to like my time early stage starting companies or in tech specifically, what I would tell people to do and what I've done, and I'll get back to like what we've done and how it's changed with our process now. But in tech, it's always about going out early on and shadowing and introducing yourself to your best customers and really understanding like I know I've seen a lot of people say that job to be done, like since the 2 years I've been off LinkedIn is now like dead. But I'll tell you right now, a jobs to be done interview is like brilliant. And it's Clayton Christensen. Everyone should look it up. But I would go in and I would learn what my prospects did. Like, hey, why did you buy our product? What was the pain you were going through? How did it solve it? And then even in those conversations, I would say, hey, who else do you know that I can talk to? And a lot of times that wasn't our customer. Just by the way, another prospecting tool for your first 90 days in the seat. But as you grow, what I can tell you is like the difference between kind of what we did early on and what we're doing now hasn't changed, right? It's gotten sexier because we hired Jared Anderson, who's an enablement genius, and we could finally afford him. So thank God. But it's still, hey, here are, I guess the way that I train it now is I break it down by people. This is your expectations. Here's what good looks like at this organization. And then from there, it's the prospect. Hey, here is who we serve. Early on at Beam, Alex and I and a couple other guys that work there, dude, we didn't know who we served. We put ads on Facebook. We had a bunch of people fill stuff out, and we just showed up to every house and was like, how the hell do we make money? Right. But as you grow as an organization, I think startups are the same way here. But as you grow as an organization, you start to understand your product prospect at a deep level, and you start to train your guys early on the prospect, right? And then from there, you can train them on the problem that each of those prospects have. Like for us, we have different markets. We have roofing in New York. Those people are completely different than people that need a roof in South Carolina. Completely different mentality, completely different income bracket, credit level, things of that nature. If I'm hiring a guy in South Carolina, he's going through our South Carolina training, right? He's understanding exactly how Mary in South Carolina is going to pick up the phone and what good heavens means, right? Versus the guy in New York who's going to be like, F you. And that actually means like, hey man, what's up, bro? I'm ready to move forward, right? So there's a lot of just nuances in as you scale and as you grow, but it still is understanding the prospect, the problem, the process, the product, and really going from there and just saying, okay, cool. This is how we go out to market and sell. And whether you're at, I think if you're at $0, a lot of times it is understanding, the industry and who sells and things of that nature. But as you scale, it really does the lever starts to move forward to, hey, who are we trying to solve this problem for? And how the hell do we actually get out to market?
And so, all right. So on that side of things, when you go in, so let's take it from zero, basically. You come into this not knowing anything. And really, if you look at these job hopping, you're coming in with skills of the job or the role itself, typically, but you're kind of coming into a new industry. So in that way, it's not so much learn the product for the sake of product knowledge, because that's more of a function of support, of customer success, like those types of things. You really do need I need to know the product for those things. In this sense, it's a vehicle to eventually get to understanding your customer and to be able to do it quickly. So if you're basically starting at zero, it's learn those deep aspects of the product. And you could do it in these phased approaches, like a 101, a 201, a 301. I like that. So it's like you're not drinking from a fire hose. You're getting a base level understanding. Then I move up into slightly more technical. But at that same time, you were going in and actually reading industry publications, all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, to your point before, just micro marketing doesn't mean you stop doing what else you were doing. You're going on these sales calls, you're putting this stuff out. I started my own business. You just
dude,
you answer anybody is like, I'll talk to you. You're like, all right, I'll be there.
I mean, at zero, it is like, and for me, it was, hey, I've got to grow this sales team because we're all making $0, and the only way any of us are going to make any dollars is if we go out and sell this product. And so for me, it was like early on, I mean, we had to learn, and I think it's a little different for founders that have built the product, right? They have a little bit of knowledge in the product early. But if I'm like a salesperson who's just walked into this role, or I'm a manager, heck, I'm a VP and I'm changing industries completely, my job, like if I'm sitting down with our CEO and learning about the product, I don't just want to know about the product. I don't care about the sexy features and all the benefits and like all this stuff. I want to know, like, hey, who does this help? What pain does this solve for who? Right? And then I'm going to start going out and having conversations, right? If I'm a rep, and I'm going to just reach out to individuals. And as a rep, you can go out and reach out to your best customers, right? Go out and reach out to these people that are super happy with your product. Go to customer success and be like, hey, can you give me 10 people that are just stoked as hell on our product? Can you intro me to them? I just want to understand everything about like who they are, what they do, how they use it, all of that. But if I'm learning about the product, it all needs to be tied back to the prospect. Like for us, it was like, I'd never sold an HVAC. I'd never sold solar. I never sold a roof. Hell, I've never been on top of a roof in my entire life. So I needed to learn that product, because when I go out to, Randy's house in the middle of North Carolina, who's fixed his HVAC by himself for the last 20 years, but I better sound at least like an expert, right? I better not just be like kicking it and being like, sounds shitty, Randy. Sorry, bud. You know, and that is something like where I think when I'm putting these things out there of like, hey, prospect knowledge is bigger than product knowledge. You need to still know your product, right? You still need to know, but you
Sure.
know your product because of how it solves the problem. You know your product because of how it actually helps them achieve what they want to go achieve. For us, I mean, we've all been in a house that has been without an HVAC, like it broke or it's not heating or cooling as well as it is. Like, bro, I'll pay about as much money as humanly possible to fix that problem. We know what that problem is, but now I need to know how that our product, our brand new train unit with a smart thermostat versus their little thing that you do this on top of. Like, I need to know how that's going to solve their problem, which is for us high electricity bills, because an inefficient HVAC is, it takes up 50% of your electric bill, right? How it's going to save them money, how it's going to keep them cool, how it's not going to break down, how our service plan helps them, right? We come out 2 times a year. You're never going to have to go out there and kick it again in the winter, Mary, right? There are just those things that you need to innately know so I can speak to the prospect about solving their pain. Even if I had the best product knowledge in the world, and I just went into Mary and I just gave her all the features and benefits and everything of the train, I would cause confusion, and confusion doesn't cause conversion, right? I mean, we've
Yeah.
done that. We have reps still to this day that'll walk in and oversell the solar piece. And dude, solar's super simple. Sun hit panel, panel electrify home. The end. That's solar, right? It's a flat, you don't ever have to deal with rate increases. That's like the only thing that solar does. It's not super sexy. It's cool. Sure. Maybe it helps the environment. We don't know, right? We'll see. But like, it's
Yeah.
one of those things that when you look at it, you should only know your product to the level that it helps solve the problem for your prospect, right? And anything deeper than that is just like, hey man, you're really smart. Congratulations. But beyond that, like, I don't want a museum tour demo. I want to know, hey, I've got problem A, I am persona A, I need solution A, right? Like, don't show me 13 other things before you show me the thing that solves my problem.
And so you did that solo. I mean, you were working with a team, right? But as you build this out, you do that somewhat to yourself. You get this knowledge, you put together this LMS, you do these levels. How do you roll that out effectively on a small team? And then how do you roll that out effectively as you have a big team? Because hiring goes up. I'm sure you bring on chunks of
Yeah.
people instead of just one at a time. Like what's that like?
So I think one misconception of like large companies is like a lot of things change. I think the things that change between being a 13-person company to a 300-person company is like politics, like, to be quite honest with you, right?
Really?
And obviously, at a 13-person company, like, I knew all the reps. The reps walked into my office every day. Like, we high-fived every time they closed the deal. Now, today, October 18th, I don't know the names of some of our reps, right? And I don't know the cohorts of the people that are walking through the door, every month that we do a hiring cohort. But the differences really don't necessarily change from a training perspective, because we don't hire like 25 people at a time. At least we don't, right? And this could change for someone that does hire 25 people. We're typically hiring anywhere between 10 and 15 people in a hiring cohort. And so they're going through the trainings that
That's a
it's
lot
still,
still.
it's still definitely a sizable amount. But what's different about it is at 13 people, I was training them. At 300 people, we've got training managers that are training them, but they're still training them on the process that we've built and that we've tested on thousands of homeowners over the course of, Sunco, the company that acquired us, has been around since 2018. We've been around since 2021. So like over combined 8 years, we've built these processes out. The biggest thing that changes is just like, hey, you actually have a training manager. My biggest thing is, hey, the training manager needs to be able to train 80% as well as I do. So the training manager needs to be trained. They need to understand the product. They need to understand the prospect. They need to understand the problem. And I think that's really what changes, not necessarily the content. That being said, I think one thing that companies do poorly, and we have as well, is when you launch a new initiative, you launch a new product, you launch something that is a new feature, something like that, you need to go back and train on that too. And it's not just a Loom video of how this thing works. People need to have an hour on their calendar and actually understand how this works and be able to ask questions. I think those are the things that changed. Like when we had a new solar panel that came in, I'd literally at our morning correlation meetings just be like, hey guys, there's 12 of us in this room. Like, this is what it is. Ask questions. For now, like we have different lender things that are coming out. It's a matter of me or, our head of RevOps going to a director level person and saying, hey, we need to roll this out, and us having to build and then, delegate that thing. So I think that's the biggest difference. The training doesn't necessarily stop or change in any way outside of like when we first started, we were in North Carolina and we knew North Carolina. Now we're in, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, New Jersey, Connecticut. Like we're in all of these places. Northern California is different than Southern California. Hawaii is different than New Jersey. Like those are kind of the things that have changed, not necessarily the content or even the message.
Okay. All right. That answers that answered my next question of like, okay, how do you make sure that stays relevant as you grow? But so then the idea is, okay, I build this out at the core. As we scale, I have the ability to train all these people I'm working with on what I know is true, because at that point, you're actually still doing direct sales. You're still doing all that stuff. So you actually are in the field, you're seeing the results, all that kind of stuff. And then as you hit a certain point, you shift from being the one to train the direct reps to train the trainer. And so make sure that trainer has 80% of what you know in terms of the knowledge of the customer, knowledge of the product, to make sure that they're staying up to date with that stuff, and then they can train the next. But as you move forward, you've got to be able to get them up to date on new things that evolve, new initiatives. So you have to, all right, so you have to keep that connection going so that continues down the chain. How do you stay engaged in your position with what's actually happening in the field and making sure that you're in the right spot and you're actually, you're skating to where the puck is, how do you do that?
I think first thing is data, right? And I think just to kind of back up for a second, I think what you just said, I don't want to skip over it, but this is also the reason that prospect knowledge is more important than product, because a lot of times it's just a different prospect that we're going after when there's a new feature or benefit or things like that. It's not necessarily a completely different product. And that's why prospect knowledge is so crucial. But to kind of answer this question specifically, everything starts with data. And I'm not saying data just like, I love dashboards, I love spreadsheets, sure, like that's fine. But like data is having conversations, right, with the VPs, directors, the managers, the reps, right? I will say that I don't typically have a ton of conversations with reps, very rarely with managers. But what I have built in our system is I have visibility into every single level. And that means I can see everything from how many calls someone made to their connect rate, to their connect to book rate, their book to sit rate, all of these things. But one thing that I've really built out that I think has been crucial, and I built it out once we went through the acquisition, because I didn't know what the hell was happening in South Carolina, right? And I didn't, versus North Carolina versus New York, was every single rep has a one-on-one doc that they fill out every single week with their manager. I have access to that one-on-one doc, but every manager has access. They fill out a one-on-one doc with their direct report. That direct report, that director fills it out for their VP. Their VP fills that out for me, right? The rep is talking about themselves, the sets, the closes, things of that nature, right? The manager is talking about their market. The director is talking about multiple of the markets that they are. And then the VP is talking about outside versus inside sales, because we have outside and inside sales. And then I have my one-on-one with those VPs. I do sometimes, I'd say probably like once a quarter, I have skip level meetings with like the directors and sometimes the managers, where I'll just go in and just kind of have those conversations. Typically I have the VPs there with me. But what I've done is, the way that you're able to kind of just see and make sure that everything's happening is, number one, the data. So make sure you have clean data, the dashboards, things of that nature that you can look at, on the CRM, right? But even beyond that, is a number doesn't tell me why a top performer is having a bad month, right? But I can go and look and say, hey, North Carolina is down on sales this month. I had a conversation with the VP. He told me this. Here are the things that they put in the one-on-one doc that I'm looking at. Here are some of the, dashboards that they've taken screenshots of. But I can even go down and say, hey, the manager is saying, hey, here are the individuals that I have concerns about. So I can double click on that person and hyperlink. And by the way, this is just in Google Docs. I can hyperlink into that person's one-on-one doc, and I can look at their coaching plan. And I can also look, we kind of have like a diary at the end of like, hey, how you feeling? How's everything going? Kind of thing. And I can see like, oh, our top performer, their dog died. Oh, okay, cool. That's why they've been out for the last 2 weeks. That's what's happening. And it's like, I may not know that top performer's face from their name, but now I can look at that and say like, oh, okay, cool. I get that this person in North Carolina is struggling because of X, Y, and Z. And I can even go back to the VP and be like, hey, why didn't you know this? Right? Why did it take me having to go all the way down to that? But I think it's creating, or it's eliminating silos. And I think a lot of people talk about silos in an organization, from like sales to marketing, customer success, operations. Like, oh, I don't know what marketing's doing to get us leads. I don't know what operations is doing to fulfill. But there are silos within levels in a lot of organizations, where the director doesn't know what the rep is doing. The VP doesn't know what the manager is doing. And that's the hugest issue. And so one of the things that I always tell all of these guys, and if any of the guys are listening, they'll probably just like laugh when they hear this, but I tell them like, my job is really, really simple as the chief revenue officer. It is to put you in the best possible position to be successful. That's it. Right. And there's a lot of work that goes into it, right? That's simplifying a lot of the things that we do. But
sure,
the way that I can really put people in the best possible position to be successful is be able to see all the way through and have a full line of sight all the way down to the rep level on the sales side, and say like, oh, okay, here's what's happening. And I can even say like, hey, this manager isn't coaching on the right thing, right? And I think there's a lot of leaders that would say, well, don't you feel like that's micromanaging? No, I think that's actually taking accountability for your entire org, who the board every quarter that sits in our conference room is expecting me to have accountability for this entire revenue organization, right? And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I've implemented that has been probably the lowest hanging fruit with the highest impact return.
So basically it's a corroboration of two lines of data points, essentially.
Yeah.
Is you can get your HubSpot data, whatever the CRM is. I can have all of that stuff broken down: activities, calls, emails. What is the rate of calls to demos booked? What is the rate of demos booked to actual quoting? And then that to close, whatever your flow is. But you can run through that and see at least numbers, and then you have the totals months over months. And so that's like numbers wise what can jump out at you and show a discrepancy. And then on the other side, you have this, I'll call it anecdotal, but arguably, I would almost say in this scenario, as you laid it out, arguably more important information that provides context to the numbers. Because even for me in my head, when I see a bunch of numbers, I'm not like a numbers
Yeah.
person. So my brain kind of just shuts off. I'm like, all right, that's fine. Like, I don't know. Oh, you got it. Oh man. ACV 2.62%. I mean, should be 3.17. I mean, that's clear. It's like, all right. But then when you have this, you have a line of documentation through the organization that's like down to the field level of what are you working on? How are you feeling? What do you need to be coached on? That moves up to the management. So you have that line of communication there. Then from the management to directors, another set of line of communications, directors to VP, another set of line of communications. And then do you do the one-on-ones with your VPs
Yeah, I
too?
do the one-on-ones with my
Okay,
VPs. So they tell me what's going on so I've got two VPs. I've got an outside VP and an inside VP. They tell me exactly what's going on there. And the thing is like most of these calls, I'm not asking them data questions. I can see the data, right? We're
yeah.
strategizing in those conversations, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things. And then what I'll say is I then take that to, by the way, our CEO. And I take that and I say, hey, here's what's happening in the org. I meet with them every 2 weeks, right? That's not a weekly thing, but I say, here's what's happening, right? Here is so you have visibility into the why, the what is happening, the why it's happening, and the how we're fixing it or how we're doubling down and going from that. But yeah, and like I was saying with the VPs, I'm strategizing with them. Very rarely am I like, unless there is something like a director or a manager just isn't doing their job, like, and I can just very visibly see that, or they've documented that in their one-on-one sheet. Most of the times, like the call that I was on before this and the call that I've got after this, right? We're all going and saying like, okay, I've got a meeting with our VP, and he's saying, hey, we're having trouble with sit rate in North Carolina right now, right? Appointments aren't sitting at the percentage they were. We've had 25% drop over the last 3 weeks. What's happening? We're digging into, hey, strategizing how we actually increase that sit rate, right? And the thing is, I looked into the data, but he's coming to me with ideas, right? He's coming to me and saying, hey, here are the things that we need to do because of the down funnel stuff that I'm seeing, right? My manager's telling me this, the reps are telling my manager this.
And so basically what you're doing with this approach then is you're eliminating. So one of the issues with weekly meetings and all this stuff is a lot of times it's bullshit. Yeah. Like you end up talking about nothing, and then it's a waste of time. And then people go, why are we meeting this? I don't want to be here. I could be doing something else. And also like, it's a waste. So basically what this seems to facilitate is those lines of anecdotal or like person connected data points are flowing up and down the chain of command as needed, to the point where you're taking that meeting from being a data discussion to, hey, we're actually going to strategize on what to do next, because all of the data on both sides, the analytical and the anecdotal, is kind of taken care of to the point where you can make progress when you meet versus just discussing high level numbers and then everybody, then even the numbers people's minds go blank.
And I am a numbers person. Like I really like digging into spreadsheets and dashboards, and it's cool to see a 2.5% increase here and a 3% increase there. And like those are kind of the things that I look at and really get excited about. But what I can say is like we all can look at dashboards. It's like I don't remember, like back in the day when you'd ask a dumb question, they'd text you that like Google it or something like that. Like there was a meme that was like www whatever Google. Anyway, like you can. I don't want to have Googleable conversations with my managers, my VPs. Like go look at your dashboard. I'm looking at your dashboard. I can see all of this data. I now need to know like, hey, what actions do we need to take from this data? What actions do we need to take from this anecdotal piece, right? And there's sometimes where it's like, bro, stop listening to that rep. He just whines, right? That's okay. Like, but it's like, what actions do we need to take? And then how do we go take them? And like, who's the owner of this project? Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's them. And it's like, let's go get this thing done. Here are the results that we need to see for this to be successful. Let's go. Like, every meeting. And it's the same with our managers. Our managers' calls aren't like, hey, rep A, right? Hey, Chris, what's going on here with this number? No, we all know that you didn't make enough dials last week. We all know that, hey, you uploaded these 2 calls and you literally like sounded like you didn't know anything about the company, the product, the prospect, right? We can all look at that and hear those things. It's all about how do we take that one step forward and become 1% better every single day. Like, I think that's the thing is like too many people look at the data and are like, oh, well, let's have conversations about the data. No, the data is just a single point in time. Now that we have this, like, let's actually start to take action and move forward. If it was a down week, if it was an up week, what do we need to do? And I think, like, if you're a manager, if you're a VP, whatever you are, like, stop having conversations about the data, start having conversations about the direction the data can take you in.
And does that create a more immediate and a more effective change in that rep if you take that approach?
Oh, for sure, right? Because I think the rep is always expecting to come to a, well, I don't know, but most of the meetings that I see are very much like, hey, how was your weekend? Is your dog okay? But I think like from the perspective of like what a rep is expecting is either to be like belittled in the conversation, like, why didn't you make more dials? Like, hey, go make more dials. It allows you to be more action. Yeah,
Reprimanded,
reprimanded. That's a
basically.
good word. But it's like, it allows you to be more action oriented with them, right? So it's like the way
Yeah.
that we train our managers to coach is to actually like coach. Like when I look at this data, what is
Yeah.
that challenge, right? What is like, how do we actually outline that path to success? Like, you know, coach, right? What is the action item that we need to go do and actually take this? And like, what are the consequences if we don't? And like, how do we hold each other accountable? Like, that's the thing that we look at is like, your data is just like, hey, that already happened. The result already happened. How do we move forward from that and coach you on the one thing that stuck out, right? And so I think that's the biggest change when you look at kind of the way that a lot of one-on-ones are run versus like, hey, let's like, we have to know the data in order to know the direction that we're moving in. But the difference between me being like, well, you made 100 dials, you were supposed to make 150, what happened? Like, besides me saying, hey, you ended up not getting this result, what's the behavior change that we need to do, and like what's the issue and how do we understand that? Like, it just allows you and the rep to be more action oriented and move forward. Like, cool, last week sucked, that's awesome, how do we have a better week this week? The end.
Yeah, versus why did you not do this?
Yeah.
What is wrong with
Yeah,
it?
it's like, what are you doing?
So, all right, I guess I got 2 last questions for
Well,
you.
let me text my guy and tell him I'll be a little late here. So 1 second.
Okay.
Can we take this off the podcast real quick? Is that a thing we can do on Riverside?
We can do that. Don't even worry about it. It'll be all right.
I got you, dude.
It's
Yeah,
flowing.
let's do it, man.
It's flowing nicely.
do this
Don't
real
worry
quick.
about
Yeah,
it.
we'll fly. Yeah, ask the question. I'll just shoot him a text.
That's all right. We can hang tight for a second. Everybody, well, I'll give everybody a little context of how we met. That's actually leads into my next question. So, Ned was a sales trainer at ClozeLoop for a while. Well, you did a lot more than that, but you happened to be my sales trainer when I was starting up my own company. And yeah, it was super helpful. And you kind of have a way of presenting all the concepts within ClozeLoop and tying that to an actual business case that you're not even familiar with pretty fucking well. So kudos on that. And that leads to my next question is, how are you using the ClozeLoop frameworks now?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, that's why we hired Jared Anderson, right? He came from ClozeLoop. Sorry, Corey and Owen, that's on me. We've all they've all yelled at me already, so it's all good. But the way that we're really using, I mean, we're using them, right? Plan, scan, priority path, like we're using it. I mean, all of our guys are being trained on it. I think, you know, even the way that we demo our product. I mean, we've brought over, when I first went over to Beam, I mean, it was, I literally took the frameworks and plugged them into home services. Like it was just, and
Mm,
there's some nuances to it, right? Like there's certain questions that we don't
sure.
ask. There's certain things like with the demo and things of that nature that just wouldn't necessarily make sense if I'm talking to you trying to get you like a homeowner, you as a homeowner. But I can tell you right now, I'm just actually thinking about this now, is like, I think Jared pretty much has built all of ClozeLoop into Attyx, like the end. And I think it's cool how you can take the frameworks from ClozeLoop that are really built B2B, and it's the reason I love ClozeLoop is it's just really it's like, hey, I'm talking to a human, like the end. You know what I mean? Like it's not like plan, pivot, logistics, agenda, next steps, like that works whether I'm talking to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or I'm talking to Mary at her kitchen table. And so I think that's really cool. And like the scan piece is just like, hey, I'm just uncovering pain. Right? Hey, typically the homeowners I'm talking with, right? They're struggling with X. They're
Yeah.
they're frustrated with Y. So Jared has really done an amazing job of taking those frameworks and making those homeowner specific. And then even just the way that ClozeLoop teaches how to demo, how we demo people and just going like one section by one section by one section, because in a home services presentation, it's really, really easy for someone to just over talk, right? Hey, we're going to do this. And you're
Yeah.
going to
The
say
show and
this. Yeah.
tell.
And show. Yeah, exactly. Show and tell. And I mean, he's done a really good job. And what's interesting is a lot of the guys that we hire are from the door to door space. They've sold solar before. They have a sense of like, hey, this is how I sell it. Um, a lot of our high caliber guys are like, well, I've never had sales training like this in my life. It's completely different. So huge
Hmm.
shout out to Jared. He's done an amazing job. Huge shout out to Nick Hansen, who's our VP of outside. He's been in direct sales since 2004. And I mean, he came in here having been a VP at a massive, one of the largest solar companies in the country. And he came in here and just adopted the closed loop frameworks just amazingly. And I think that's just a huge kudos to our team. And, I brought it over and they could have easily been like, this is dumb. We're going to keep doing what we do. But no, they adopted it really well and we use it for everything. And I build the playbooks out the same way that Matt at ClozeLoop used to build playbooks out. So
Yeah, taking those lessons, man. It's been hugely helpful. It's even, what's crazy about the closed loop frameworks? It's even helpful when you're looking for a
yeah,
job. Like like as I was looking for a new role, that was really the way I approached it. Was like, okay, I'm going to try to approach this like a sales piece, and you start to take all these things of, okay, I know that businesses usually deal with this type of issue. I've seen X, Y,
yeah,
Z. Like, is that what you're dealing with? Or that's not what you're
yeah,
dealing with? Like,
yeah,
whatever way you want to ask that final
yeah.
question, I need to put my flair on it because, those are always the things. But like, just that kind of stuff. And then it helps you see. That's a good point. You come to somebody as a person.
Yeah.
Like, it helps you see, how does an organization work? This is not a I am not an economic
No,
buyer. Hello, John. Are you an economic
yeah,
buyer or or are you a luxury
yeah,
buyer?
yeah.
It's like, hey, there's all these dynamics going on at this company. And I bet starting that business helped see it too, because it gives a lot of empathy to what people are dealing with. Not just like empathy, like, oh my God, I totally understand who you
Yeah.
are. It's like, oh shit, when you own a business, you basically have no fucking clue what's going on at any given moment. And it's almost like every decision I make is almost like, what is the least bad decision I can make
Yeah.
today in this moment? And there's so much confusion. There's a ton of politics. You have resources. Okay, I'm talking to this person. I'm selling an enterprise ERP maintenance software solution, and they just implemented an enterprise ERP accounting software, and they just finished it last month. Not happening right
Probably
now.
not going to be the right
And
time. Yeah.
and it's like, you just kind of come to people at a human level, and that's an interesting way to
Yeah.
put it.
I will say that
So
it's, you know, the to be cliche is like sales is human to human, right? It's like, yeah, you got to know certain aspects of the business. And we talked about that at the beginning. I won't beat a dead horse there, but I think what the closed loop frameworks do is they really do allow you to just like understand what the next step is, right, in your process.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we've got, it's wild. I think, I will say this. I think that everyone at one point in their career should just try to sell to homeowners. It's a very interesting process for sure, especially if you come from like enterprise, like buttoned up, or, even if it's startup sales, there's like, a lot to be said around that. But like when you're walking into someone's home at dinner time and you're having a conversation and they're getting up and they're stirring their soup and they're yelling at their kids to be quiet and there's all of this like distraction, it's so easy for you to be like halfway through your scan question or halfway through the priority path, right? Or halfway through this part of the demo and they're like, hold up, the mailman's here. Let me go get my mail. And it's just like, with closed loop frameworks is you're never off track. Like it's totally cool that Mary needs to go out, go and make sure her kid has food because I know what the next step is. Oh, I just scanned. All right, next is priority class. Oh, I asked you this priority question. Okay, here's my next question I need to ask. And it just allows you to be human in that process. And it also allows you to just say like, hey, it's okay if I don't ask these in sequential order because there's a lot of
Hmm.
things going on as long as I get to the end result at the end. Whereas I think there is a lot of like the frameworks and the things that I've seen out there that are very much like, well, if the yeah,
Script.
it's scripted. Whereas like with closed loop, sure, there's things that we say like you should say, but man, put your flair on it. Some of our top reps, like they follow the framework, but they say things completely different than I would, and they still crush. So
Yeah. And then I guess my final question is, why is everybody on LinkedIn so butthurt about people from like Gong or these big companies giving sales advice? Like, I
yeah,
understand you might not agree with it or whatever it might be, but why is everybody bitching and moaning about those people giving advice?
yeah,
I don't understand it. I'm wondering if you could shed some light
yeah.
on it.
I've been on LinkedIn like a month. You're trying to get me canceled already. Um, Man, I think it comes down to a lot of like jealousy. To be honest with you, I think a lot of LinkedIn is like, hey, why does this 22-year-old kid think that he can give advice, and why is he getting 150 likes when I've gotten one like on this post, and I feel like my stuff is better? It's like, oh, it's just because they work for a big company, and it's like, hey, yeah, some of the prospecting advice that I see, it's like sucks, right? Or some of the discovery, or like, quite
Yeah.
honestly, a lot of it isn't actually advice. It's just kind of like shit, like it's just them like
Yeah.
writing something to write something. And but I think what I really like about it is, man, at 22 years old, just share your journey. Hey, here's what I tried today, and here's what happened. And like, I really do think in the LinkedIn world, there are a lot of like those LinkedIn OGs that maybe like aren't getting as many likes as they used to, and they haven't changed the way that they're talking. Or I guess I'm learning that the algorithm likes selfies or whatever the hell it is, so I've started asking, putting pictures on my stuff. I don't know, but I think a lot of it really is just around jealousy. It's like, hey, why is this kid getting this much love? Like, I've been in the industry for 20 years. Why am I not an advisor of 27 companies? And it's like, dude, I'm an advisor of 6 companies right now. Like, do you know what an advisor role is? It's kind of like you show up once a quarter for an hour and like you put it on your LinkedIn. I don't put my advisory roles on my LinkedIn for that reason. Like, and it's just like, bro, we're not really doing
Wait,
much.
you don't want to show everybody you're part of 26, you're employed by 26
Yeah,
companies?
just like I think it is a lot of that, like, people that are just like, well, I've been working hard. Why am I not seeing the same success? And I'm just going to shit on the people that are seeing success. And, it's like, all right, cool. Like if this person gives bad advice, but they're making good money and they're successful at their organization, like, cool, man. Like maybe talk to that kid and be like, hey, how the heck do you do what you do? And they might give you some terrible advice, but at least listen to them. And here's the cool thing. And this is something I've learned is that, cream rises to the top, right? And everything else kind of falls to the bottom. And I mean, there are a lot of people that when I log back onto LinkedIn, I haven't seen them. or they're like just an AE at some company still. And it's like, well, yeah, that's because you were really, really good at writing content. You probably should be a content marketer, but you're still an AE. And it's like, I wonder why. Or you see these super short tenures from people that are like, this is how you're a leader. And it's like, well, you lasted 3 months at this company. Or like, what's this career gap that I know you were at a company for? Like, because you had it there, but now it's not. And so I think instead of people hating everyone for like all this, like just posting, it's like, dude, just collaborate and just don't collaborate with the people that you think suck. And maybe do collaborate with the people that suck, and your content, if you're really that much better than them, it'll shine through, and maybe they won't shine through as much. So I think it's just being a human, right? It's the same thing with like it's being election season, right? Like, hey, who are you voting for? Oh, I
Yeah.
hate you. And it's like, hold up, what? Like, like, okay, cool, man. Yeah, it's been fun being friends for 5 years. Like,
I'm
yeah,
done.
like so it's just a bunch of old people that are upset.
I do like seeing the people that are like, no, I'm not just mad that they're successful. I'm doing this like out of like I need to
Oh,
protect the sales
bro.
community. It's like, dude,
Yeah, and it's like, or like,
shut your
yeah, or
computer
like the
off.
people that'll like repost the screenshots of like bad SDR outreach. It's like, dude, like no one cares,
Oh,
bro.
I love directors of marketing or like VPs of marketing. Like, I can't believe somebody cold
Oh
called me. It's
God,
like,
yeah.
you're a fucking idiot. You don't realize that if those people don't call and get deals in the door, you don't have a
Yeah,
job. I'm the director of operations and I am so upset with how people, it's like, yes, there's plenty of outreach that sucks.
just deal with
Just
it.
deal
Like,
with
dude,
it. Or
I
don't,
get.
yeah, don't pick up
I
your
mean, the
phone.
amount of like LinkedIn messages I get about like lead generation, or like the amount of cold calls I get, like I mean, I actually posted or I commented on a post. Some guy was like, "Cold calling's dead," and like, dude, I've spent $500,000 in the last quarter on like people that have cold called me. It works. Like,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm a little bit
Yeah.
softer, right? Because I've been an SDR and like I know how it feels. But like, they actually solved a problem that I had. They understood what I was dealing with. They like really did the steps. Like, I posted on LinkedIn. They reached out. I didn't respond. They called, right? Like, they found me and they called me, and I happened to have a free moment, and I picked up the phone, and it was just like, oh shoot, we are actually thinking about this. It's like, cool. And like one of them,
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about it. And we spent $240,000 with that guy. And it's like, dude, I didn't even know the company existed. I didn't even know the thing that they sold was an option. And so it's like all of these people that
Mm-hmm.
are out there just like either like belittling these SDRs or trashing other people making content. It's just like, bro, like go back to your hole and like your terrible life and just like cry yourself to sleep. Like, we all know that you're not as rich as you make yourself look. You're not as successful. You're not as like, you're a director, but like, let's be real, you've got 5 or 6 more layers of you in that company that you're in. Right. So like, you're not the big tuna. Relax, my dude. Just go have fun. You can live one life. Like, who gives a shit? Like, have some fun.
You're wrong. Cold calling is dead, dude. I have the numbers to prove it. I've got 7
Oh,
reports, shows it every
I'm just like,
time.
yeah, dude. Yeah.
So I don't know what you're talking about, but that's
Yeah,
dead, dude.
it
Give
is.
it
Yeah,
up.
and like you probably shouldn't even market anymore, and just
No.
stop running businesses. Like I can tell you right now,
Yeah.
we've started a field sales rep position, which is knocking doors. So we've been a 100% leads based company for 3 years. Um, we started to hit a little bit of like a plateau with leads, and so we were like, all right, cool, let's get some boots on the ground. Let's cold call in our market. Dude, our the guys that knock doors do about as much as the guys that do our leads. And it's like, yeah, if cold calling or cold knocking or cold emailing or LinkedIning, like if it didn't work, dude, I wouldn't have a company. And it's like 99% of these people, like you said, it's like these directors of operations, you wouldn't have a job, brother. So it's like, hey, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing, and we're going to do it better. And like, sure, we're going to add new features to it, and like add new initiatives and go and, become better at the things that we do. And utilize AI, but like you have to outreach to the people that can buy your product, or guess what? They're never going to know who you are, and you're never going to make money, and that's going to suck for a lot of people.
Yep. Well said. I think that's a perfect spot to end it. Thanks for doing this, dude. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
dude, absolutely, bro.
And there's
There's
your
my notification.
notification that it's time to wrap it up. That's your AI assistant right there. Before we go, is there anything that you want to plug? Anything that you want people to know?
I'm doing nothing with my life. It's been really good. No, no. I'm literally, if anyone wants to reach out, I'm on LinkedIn again. Finally, I'm not on any other social media. No Instagram, no Facebook, no X.com. But I am on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect, reach out. One thing I will say is executives aren't as busy as you think they are. So reach out and say, hey, and if I don't get back to you, you can reach back out, and I might still not get back to you, but I apologize in advance. So,
but you can try.
It's worth a shot.
Thanks,
Cool.
dude.
Yeah, man.